Production numbers. I get asked about this quite a lot on the Spectra Creative channel. How many units should a toy company make? How do they decide how many units to make? Well, it's not a straightforward question, but we might be able to get to a straightforward answer. First off, we should look at something that does have a specific answer: limited editions. Items that are set to be a very specific number of units, whether it's 25,000 units or the 120 units. These are very different from items that are done at mass retail. At mass retail, whether you're dealing with a kid line or, well, an older kid line, setting a production unit for retail is, well, it's a bit of an art form, and there's not a direct way of approaching it. There's spreadsheets, there's precedent, and there's a skill set. But like I said, first let's talk about items that have a limited run, or rather, items that are produced to an exact amount. This is otherwise known as a pre-sale. So whether you're buying something on HasLab or the now defunct Matty Collector, or it is a GoFundMe type of project, these can be all done to an exact specification of the end consumer. The number of units that are pre-ordered are the number of units made. This is what we did for Matty Collector with the subscriptions, as well as some of the larger items like Castle Grayskull. We would simply put up a meter, like this outline of Doomsday here, and show exactly where we were as far as the number of subscriptions needed to go into production, even offering different tiers or levels, something that HasLab also does. And if we were able to successfully reach the number of units needed, essentially above the minimum, at least the minimum, well, then we could go into production and actually offer the item. By doing it as a pre-sale like this, it mitigated the risk of having excess units. You knew exactly how many you were making because you had that number of subscribers or customers ahead of time. Not every item succeeded this way. At Matty Collector, when I was at Mattel, we tried doing an Ecto 1 for the 6-inch figures, and the same thing, we had our meter, this time shaped like the Ecto 1 itself, and unfortunately that little green hue on the tires as it crept up just did not hit the goal, so the item never went into production. But by doing it as a pre-sale this way, it at least mitigated the risk. Now, of course, when doing a pre-sale, it also means exponentially more customer relations and actually talking to the customers, sharing with them details, and making sure they're on board so they know what they're getting. The reward to the customers is they get something yummy, shiny, and awesome. The reward for the toy company is that they can make it right up to the limit without going over. They know exactly where to cork the bottle, and they can get out without losing their shirt. And they can guarantee the item can come to market. It's a little different for retail. Retail, well, it is a bit of a monster when you're trying to figure out exactly how many units to make. It starts with something called doors. That's the industry term for the number of actual retail stores that any particular chain has. So, as an example, when you're referring to something like Walmart or Target, you could actually say, well, Target has, in this case, 2,600 doors in the US, meaning locations. Or Walmart has something, I think, around 3,500. I'm probably off on my numbers. It changes all the time. But that's the whole idea. And once you know how many doors there are, you can calculate units per store per week based on the number of pegs. Each peg is responsible for selling 1 unit per week. Then this has to also be run through what's called the MOQ, which is minimum order quantity, that a vendor or manufacturer, usually in China, is willing to be able to make. They're not going to make an item if the order is not big enough, under their minimum order. If it is under their minimum order, they might consider making it if you pay them a lot more, but then this cost has to be passed on to the consumer. One thing that helps get a toy line past this MOQ is if it's tied to what's called a tentpole event. So this is most likely going to be a movie, and it's usually going to be a major movie that a studio is behind when we actually had movies to go to during the summer. And while some toy lines are a surprise hit and wind up changing pop culture forever, it's not always this way. Even movies that are designed to be huge tentpole events and essentially designed to be blockbusters, well, The films aren't always blockbusters, and therefore the toy lines aren't always blockbusters. And there's a lot of movies that, well, basically want a toy line. While some are kind of guaranteed to get a toy line, I guess, more or less, because they might be a sequel or they might be part of a current license or a franchise, others have to go around and either be pitched to toy companies or the reverse, have toy companies pitch to the studios for the opportunity to do them. But for every hit, there's probably about 5 to 7, I don't want to say duds, but it kind of becomes a guessing game which one is going to be a hit. And much like a blockbuster movie, one blockbuster can pay for several movies not performing. The same with a toy line. One really good toy line can pay for others that don't perform. So how do you know which ones to bet on? Well, this is where it comes in with talent. It's understanding toyetic aspects of a property. And plug for my company, Spectre Creative, at spectrecreative.com, this is one of the services we offer. We work with studios and screenwriters and toy companies to help ensure their properties, their movies, are toyetic from day one, as opposed to trying to force them to be toys after filming has wrapped. All right, so with that plug out of the way, how do toy companies know which movies to more or less bet on? Well, there's a formula. And actually, going back to my plug, this is what Spectre Creative helps with, because understanding the formula is something that takes years, if not decades, of work to truly understand. You can apply the formula to a movie, but it's not going to guarantee the toy line is going to work. Because if the movie doesn't work, even if the movie has all of the toyetic elements that the formula says it should have, a hero, a villain, a signature weapon, those type of things, well, you could make the greatest toy line in the world, and I will say that the Green Lantern toy line that I helped work on at Mattel for the movie was amazing. But unfortunately, because the movie didn't meet financial expectations at the box office, it meant the toy line didn't do well either. Likewise, in the world of DC, looking at Superman Returns, which came out a few years before Green Lantern, this was also one that Mattel, if you will, bet on and assumed, well, the recognition of Superman, the fact that he's back on the big screen after decades off, this is an easy movie to bet on and will do great at the box office, and the toys will do huge. Well, not so much. The movie did okay, but the toys, again, not so much. And part of that is because Superman doesn't have all of those toyetic qualities. He doesn't really have visual powers the way someone like Green Lantern does. On the other hand, a movie that came out the same summer as Superman Returns is Cars. And when Mattel was looking at Cars and Superman, all the chips went over to Superman Returns. People figured, well, Cars will be one and done. We'll be lucky to get some cool items out of it, but no one's going to remember it after one summer. Well, lo and behold, unlike Superman Returns, which everyone was betting on, Disney Cars became a billion-dollar global retail line, and Mattel had to scramble to catch up to meet demand as kids fell in love with these characters. So, does that mean it's a guessing game? Does that mean that Hasbro and Spin Master and Mattel and Jakks have this crystal ball in the back room? Wait, you know about the crystal ball? No one's supposed to know about the crystal ball. It's an industry secret. Okay, there's no crystal ball, but there are crystal ball people. And by that, I mean very skilled toy makers that have essentially a sixth sense, or what I would call a gut reaction. Being able to look at a property and immediately understand whether or not it more or less checks the boxes of what's going to work as a toy line. And again, looking at Green Lantern and Superman, Green Lantern checked a lot more boxes than Superman did, but it still didn't do well. So having a gut reaction isn't going to be a guarantee that the toy line is going to sell, but experience does count. Often I was called on to sort of train new brand managers at a few of my positions, as new people came on board every year and others transferred off. Because I was sticking around and I really didn't leave the boys' action group, when I would meet with new employees, new marketing managers, I would tell them to think of the toy lines they were making with the same passion as whatever hobby they did on the weekend. Whatever they spent, 2 or 3 hours on a Sunday afternoon doing, whatever brought them joy, that energy, that emotional connection is what you need to bring to a toy line. You have to think like a kid or a collector, or ideally both. And not everyone, well, honestly, has the ability to do this. It's not something you can just be trained to do from a spreadsheet. And the two common obstacles are going into underproduction, which means you don't have enough to meet demand, which is what happened with cars, and money was, if you will, left on the table. So, sales that could have happened were missed because there was not enough product, because people didn't think cars was going to be as toyetic as it was. Of course, the opposite side of the coin is overproduction, and this is way worse. If you make toys for a line that flops or a movie that flops, and they wind up on the clearance aisle, well, not only have you lost money, but you've damaged the brand in the long run, both the brand that you're licensing, like the movie, the characters, and your toy company as well. This is not where you want to see your toys wind up. So, how does one avoid this? How do you get that very thin line that's right in the middle where you can zero in on what movie to produce toys from and how many to make? And what is the production number? Well, honestly, you're kind of born with it. Much like professional basketball players like Michael Jordan here, who is inherently skilled at basketball. His skill is by birth. He's an amazing basketball player. Or Nicoletta Bendetti is an amazing violinist. Her ability, she obviously had to learn to play the violin, but her ability to do that is, from birth. It's a gift, if you will. And it doesn't really get talked about that much in the same light, but in my opinion, the ability to understand toys is very similar. It's a gift. And I've seen some toy makers at companies that are unbelievable at this, and some not so much. And I think a big trick to helping companies succeed is identifying these type of future employees. By hiring toy fans, if you will, get it? See the pun with toy fans? Never mind. But hiring people that are already into toys and are very passionate about toys, whether it's collecting toys, playing with toys with their children, buying toys for their grandchildren, this is a big difference between just bringing someone in. Knowing the emotional connection between brain, heart, and idea is a rare gift, and not everyone can do it. Just like not everyone can play violin and not everyone can play NBA All-Star basketball. There are people who are more talented at these things. And people tend to look at toy makers as just manufacturers of consumer goods. But it really is more than that. Because you're making product that have a deep emotional connection to the consumer, in order to hit the bullseye and find the production numbers that are right on and zero in on which properties to make, you need to have this skill set. You're not just replaceable. Finding employees that are brand managers or toy designers that are just there to make industrial design or make spreadsheets work and push product to market, well, when you lose connection to that emotional feel and that emotional desire to play and to collect, that really is the difference between success and failure. And the decisions that are made on how many units to produce is tied directly into a true understanding of the emotional connection between toy, child, parent, collector, and gift giver. And of course, retailers as well. The best way to do this? Find employees that love toys. Find employees that are passionate about toys. If you do this, you'll wind up with happier customers, happier retail partners, and better profits in the end for you, the toy company. And that is how to find better production numbers. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, give it a subscription or a like. It tells YouTube to share it with other people, and that's what this channel is all about, sharing toy love. Thanks for watching. Leave comments below, and I'll answer all of them. Thanks for watching.